Webinar, Designing the Event Space of the Future, presented by PSAV. My name is Adrienne Weil, VP of Strategic Partnerships and Business Development here at AHLA. As a platinum partner of AHLA, PSAV supports our industry's growth and efficacy, and we're thrilled to have members of their team join us today. In this 30-minute webinar, we'll explore the latest event experience trends that are driving today's design considerations and what you can do to maximize the revenue potential of your hotel meeting spaces. Our speakers today include Hallie Cooper, Vice President, Business Development, Ownership, and Management Groups, and Matt Harvey, President, Internet Services. Before I turn today's presentation over to our presenters, a few housekeeping remarks. Today's webinar will be recorded for playback at a later date via the AHLA webinar archive, which is accessible with your member login information. If you have a question, please enter it into the Q&A or chat feature of the WebEx platform, and our speakers will address questions at the end of their presentation. With that, I'll turn it over to Hallie and Matt.
Thanks, Adrienne. Hi, everyone. I'm Hallie Cooper, and along with me today, Matt Harvey. Together, we hope to provide you with some insight into what the future holds in venue infrastructure. Today we're taking a look at some of the latest research in event experiences, and we'll be drawing some conclusions that will help inform future space design. We'll end with a look at 4 specific elements of technology and how to think differently about them as you build and or renovate your venues. We drew from recent research from a number of companies, including some research that we commissioned ourselves, to look for big themes about how events will evolve and to draw some conclusions about how space needs to evolve. So here are some quotes that most resonated with us around technology and how to best incorporate today's trends in your unique venue footprint. So let's discuss some of these insights. To begin, networking can take on a whole new meaning when space is designed to maximize interaction. For example, there are shared workspace venues that intentionally create narrow hallways so that you have a better chance of bumping into people. We call this the accidental meetup. Some venues have opted not to place reader boards or wayfinding maps in their lobbies so that someone has to ask actual people where something is, again to foster interaction between people and enhance or personalize the guest experience. So this is most prevalent in the emerging lifestyle brand characteristics. Part of this design influence stems from the millennials. So think of the plug-and-play workspaces that have become the expectation everywhere we go. When you walk into a Starbucks, your local library, and the airport, the first thing you do is look for an outlet to charge your phone or your laptop. We see this demand growing in hotel lobbies as well. So coming back to that accidental meetup, guests want the ability to open their laptops, meet, and speak with other guests and their customers, their workmates, and to just get work done. Many times these spaces are becoming key networking hotspots during conference breaks as well. So meetings will need to move past reactive adjustments and adopt a more proactive approach to personalized experiences. We will need to understand and anticipate the needs of participants before they arrive. And we can do this by utilizing data and predictive analytics to help map the flow of attendees and provide optimum touch points in these heavily utilized spaces. These touch points can range from strategically placed mobile food and beverage stations to ensuring additional bandwidth is dedicated for vendor booths. Video mapping and projection will enhance the guest experience and can be a strong revenue driver. And steering the attitude towards maximizing revenue at each location is the key. We also found that spaces can no longer be designed with just one journey or path in mind. The same venue space needs to accommodate parallel paths depending on the consumer that day. And this was very common on the food and beverage side, when a ballroom would have to be turned from a general session space to a meal function 1 or 2 times during the course of an event. On the technology side, the utilization of digital technology can help adapt content to flex to the usable space. The venue needs to create networking opportunities and co-working spaces, and we will be reviewing ways to reimagine your public space by using modular furnishings to enhance the end goal, whether that is additional networking space, opportunities for sponsor vendor show areas, or just audience participation. We've seen an increased demand for atypical locations to provide something new and exciting. The trend for new and unique experiences, or what is referred to as disruptors, to provide that wow factor to attendees is the wave of the future. We find mixed realities are expanding the traditional meeting space to provide additional options for attendee engagement. Video mapping capabilities can turn a ballroom into an aquarium. Guests can have dinner and experience sitting through all 4 seasons by utilizing screening and projection during the course of their dinner. Did you know that according to Carlson Wagonlit Travel, about 80% of meeting planners are embedding a tech requirement in their initial RFP to the hotel sales department? So with that type of demand, we absolutely need to be considering our infrastructure to support our ability to drive revenues in our own venues. I'm going to turn the controls over to Matt now to drill deeper into the research and what this means for design consideration.
All right, thanks, Hallie, and good afternoon, everyone. So we took a look at this research and we distilled it down into what we think are the 3 most important design considerations as it relates to technology. And we're going to define these real quick, starting with reimagine the meeting space. So to us, reimagine the meeting space can be defined like this. As events become more experiential, planners are looking for new ways to wow their attendees. Allow planners to creatively reimagine the meeting space by making sure that other parts of the venue, including the lobby, the restaurants, the guest rooms, outside, neighboring venues, and the like, are all event ready. Our second consideration is be flexible, and this is the definition. The space must be flexible enough to allow for multiple uses and fast turns, enabling the easy creation of different experiences. And finally, the third one is dream big. Space must have sufficient infrastructure to allow planners to dream big and spend their money on what matters to inspire their audience and spend less on fixing infrastructure issues. So now what we're going to do is apply these 3 design considerations to 4 key areas of technology infrastructure. And we're going to do rigging, power distribution, internet, and installed AV systems. And for each one, we're going to give you a recommendation for how we would apply each of our 3 design considerations. So we'll start with rigging. So before we talk about these recommendations, a quick definition of rigging. Rigging is the overhead hanging of lighting, video, sound, and other equipment, sometimes people, sometimes scenic elements from the ceiling structures of a ballroom. Decor and people are often the first forgotten when you're looking to value engineer a design, but both can significantly impact the functionality of that space. Think about what you could do in a ballroom if you could suspend bars and add aerial acrobatics and do fast-changing room divides by using drape and other scenic elements, for example. So here's our 3 recommendations for rigging. For reimagine, it's important to consider pre-function space as a viable placement for permanent rig points. Typically, we only ever think about putting rig points in ballrooms, but pre-function space can also create useful environments to rig in. As time between sessions and overall experience to the attendee become more important, pre-function space will increasingly be used as part of the event experience, and having rig points in that space can drive creativity in the areas of decor hanging, lighting, and video mapping. And we're going to talk more about rigging, we're going to talk about more about video mapping in a little bit as well. The second recommendation is around be flexible. So firstly, rigging isn't supposed to be flexible. Please don't design flexibility into the actual rig points. That tends to break them. Instead, for flexibility, we mean 2 things. The first is making sure your rig points are going to work with your air walls, i.e., make sure you can close the air walls with commonly flown rigs in the air, and that's going to allow you to do faster room changes. This goes hand in hand with running power and data cable through the ceilings, which obviously interferes with those cables and eliminates those cables interfering with air walls. And we'll talk about cabling infrastructure later on as well. It also means looking at sight lines for lighting and projection, which includes making sure that the fancy chandeliers we all enjoy don't impede the sight lines for those lighting and video projection elements, or at least that the chandeliers can be easily removed. For Dream Big, our recommendation is that the anticipated needs of the largest event be thought of up front. In addition to the usual front of stage lighting bars, think about all the experiences that that room could support if you had rigging points throughout the space. Again, floating buffets, floating bars, aerial performances, and the like. We are actually starting to see a trend of doing only the bare minimum reversing. It's been moving away from doing the bare minimum for a while now. Owners are instead opting to invest at a higher level up front because it's very, very difficult to correct rig points down the road, and there's real value in being able to give the planner the room to create. So let's take a look at power now. So power distribution. Power distribution we think of in two flavors. We think about heavy production power for AV equipment and catering, and we also think about utility or convenience power, which are the regular 20 amp outlets around the space. And they're more used on an ad hoc basis. They're not really designed to be critical for event production. So for Reimagine, we think about in addition to ballrooms, looking at other space that you might want to do event catering or AV production work in, particularly if you have an outside space. So locating production power disconnects in that area, in that outdoor space, for example, saves time and money for planners, since there's less need to run heavy power cables from elsewhere. And saving time and money on infrastructure means planners can spend more money on being creative and producing experiences. Flexibility in power means utility power, so the 20 amp outlets on an ad hoc basis in sufficient quantities in floor pockets, especially in ballrooms and other pre-function spaces where power-enabled furniture is on the rise. Floor pockets save running lots of cable. It makes it easier to do turns, which also saves time and labor. Think about new places convenience power might be needed, including any of the ad hoc work environments Hallie was talking about earlier that the Starbucks generation now wants to make use of. And don't forget to make convenience power convenient. We solved this problem already in the guest rooms by building outlets into lamps, for example. Find ways to do that in your pre-function space and meeting areas as well. Dreaming big for power means not needing to hire a generator to run any science show. Money spent by planners on generators is money they can't spend on the experience. So make sure you have sufficient production power in the right places to fulfill the needs of any sized event. Moving ahead, we'll talk about internet for a minute. So for internet, we're thinking about the network infrastructure that provides Wi-Fi to attendees, obviously, but it also facilitates all of the venue operations as well. So for Reimagine for me around internet means thinking about the whole hotel as meeting space. So if a client wants to do a webcast from a guest room, that should be simple. If they want to do a second screen presentation onto 400 iPads on an outdoor terrace, that should be simple. It should just be part of what the network is able to do. Also, don't underestimate the usefulness of wired jacks in new designs. They seem to be going away in lots of the designs I see these days in favor of Wi-Fi. But don't underestimate the usefulness of wired jacks, especially in unusual areas like outdoor space. Wired internet is always going to be 10 times faster than Wi-Fi. It's also way more stable, and we're going to need it in the future to transport video signal around the property as well. So when you're planning that outdoor power disconnect, make sure you stick a couple of network jacks in there too. Flexibility for internet means having a strong support solution, a strong network operations team that's going to allow the network to be reconfigured quickly, including dedicating bandwidth to various parts of the building, various shows simultaneously. It means custom configurations, particularly rebranding of portal pages for sponsorship opportunities, and being able to temporarily extend the network for special events. Again, building on this idea that meetings can happen anywhere. Dreaming big for internet means looking at the future of digital entertainment, looking for network analytics packages that provide location data insights for venues and planners, for example. One example of this might be footfall analytics, which sort of shows how long people have stayed in a particular space. This is something that planners find enormously helpful for tracking educational credits, for example. And building that into the infrastructure is going to allow planners to spend their money on something else rather than spending it on the infrastructure to track people around a building. Be aware, though, that your ability to take advantage of that data will depend on both the physical design of the network when it was put in and also the insights package that you select. And finally, our fourth area of technology is going to be installed AV systems. So installed AV systems include sound, controllable lighting, screens, video gear, all of that stuff that gets built in to the hotel. For Reimagine, we've internally started to look at something called the space between meetings. And again, it goes back to this idea of the use of pre-function space as an ad hoc meeting space. The ability for an attendee to find a quiet corner and hold a spontaneous collaboration session with other people that they might not otherwise have run into is really powerful. And enabling that for a planner without having to have them spend lots of money to create it is going to be something that planners are looking for in the future. So look for the opportunity to tech enable public and pre-function space with something like permanently installed wireless screen sharing. So a screen mounted on the wall that you can quickly wirelessly share from your iPad or your laptop and quickly share an idea and draw on the screen and annotate it and send yourself the notes afterwards and that kind of thing. And that's going to go really well with the powered furniture that we talked about earlier in the power section. For flexibility, I see a huge opportunity with digital signage. Most permanently installed digital signage systems today are still pretty boring. There's still a list of what's on in each room now, what's on in each room next. It's barely a step up from the old paper method where we used to kind of slot a piece of paper in and change it out at lunchtime. So look for ways to give that digital real estate, a huge amount of digital real estate, to a planner, and then they can use it to activate a brand or a meeting theme, and it can be changed throughout the event. And that requires two things. It requires the venue to be able to offer the creative design component so that the planner can build a graphics package that works with their meeting. And it also means the digital signage software has to be flexible enough to accept the graphics package and understand what to display on what sign at different points during the event. Secondly, with digital signage, think about how temporary signs, and temporary signs might include video mapped sections of the pre-function space wall. It might include flexible LED displays wrapped around columns and other types of displays around the space. Think about how they can tie into permanent signage software to provide a single, easy-to-manage environment for the entire digital real estate of the building. And then finally, in audiovisual solutions, dreaming big means giving the planner the opportunity to spend their money on effects and impact rather than signal distribution. So build a robust system of cable pathways and tie lines into the space. It eliminates cables across doorways, and it massively reduces setup time, all of which allow planners to spend more money on the impact and less money on the infrastructure. In the future, there will be a convergence of AV cabling tie lines onto the internet network, which will provide some more flexibility, and it will reduce the cost of installation in that area. However, in this regard, those wire jacks we talked about earlier for the network are going to become even more important because we will need them in places that support AV production as well as where they all currently are, which is mostly about internet access for clients. So these are our final thoughts, and I really have two big takeaways that came from the research that spoke to me personally. The first is build serviceability into the design. PSAV is in a lot of venues, and most of the installed tech that we see that has gone bad does so because it's not maintained or replaced at the end of its service life. So my recommendation is, make sure that serviceability is covered. Many installed systems will allow you to buy a multi-year support contract as part of the project. And obviously, in-house AV companies may also be prepared to take responsibility for installed systems too. But either way, please make sure that serviceability over the lifetime of the technology is considered at the installation phase. And then finally, and this overarching theme applies to all areas of tech and all sizes of building, think about removing barriers to creativity. Think about removing barriers to creativity. And the way I think about this in my area is think about what irritates you about events and how to solve for that. So for me, I went to an event last week, and there was an enormous number of foam core boards on easels everywhere. And there was a perfectly functional looking digital signage environment in the building too, but again, all it had on it was a list of every room and what was or wasn't on in that room on this particular evening. In fact, I even saw a foam core board propped up in front of a digital sign, which is just crazy to me. I mean, we should be able to use those digital signs to skin and brand and force the theme of the event through the entire digital signage ecosystem. So that's one that I experienced recently for myself. And then finally, think about the ROI, not just in terms of the direct technology revenue that you can generate from the installed equipment, but more so in terms of the quality of the group that you can book. So spending on infrastructure pays off in the long run because a well-thought-out space is attractive to planners that are looking to create higher quality experiences without the need to pay to fix the plumbing. That's it. That's all I have. So I'm going to turn it back over to Hallie now to finish us up.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Your insight to venue and event design is something that we can really all benefit from. Since we service approximately 1,500 venues domestically, we've seen our fair share of how not to do it. And we do love it when it gets done right, as this truly allows us to create more engaging and more memorable events for our mutual customers. And we also just love talking about this stuff, and we would enjoy hearing from you. You can reach us on Matt, if you switch the slide.
Yeah, I got you.
Yep, there he is. Thank you. You can reach us via the contact information displayed on the screen, and I invite you to contact me anytime for additional discussion. We will open up the floor now to any questions that you have on the content that we've reviewed today. Please just use the chat feature on the side of your screen, and we will try to answer the best that we can.
Hallie, we had one question come in that is if there are any recommendations on portable digital wayfinding signs.
Portable wayfinding, Matt, do you?
I will. So I sort of think portable and portable signs. I really like these. It's either called ePoster or iPoster. I forget the exact name, but if you're looking at the picture on the screen now, these things are light. They're bright. They're super engaging. They're floor to ceiling. They look so much better than anything else I've seen on the market right now. They have some basic ability to display content built in. So if you're trying to do a, this way to the, to breakfast, they're a really cool alternative to the old foam core boards. Wayfinding, if that's what you mean by wayfinding, then I hope I've answered the question. Touchscreen wayfinding is still a little harder because in a touchscreen environment where you would want to, press a button and say you're here and map your way to somewhere else, the screen has to know where it is in the building in relation to every other screen. So that takes a little bit longer to set up and is therefore less portable by definition. But if you're looking for sort of static directional signs, then I highly recommend you check out this stuff. And forgive me, I forget whether it's ePoster or iPoster, but it's one of the two.
Great. Could you also speak to just any special considerations based on the type of property one is operating in?
Yeah, of course. And, I will fully admit that lots of my examples are based on full-service hotels that support production AV operations, and, that's obviously where PSAV spends a lot of its time. I do like this idea, though, of removing barriers to creativity, and I think that can apply in any sized venue, right the way down from the focus service, multifunction room type opportunity, all the way up to the largest convention hotels. And being able to have a, think from a planner's perspective, walk into the space and go, how can I make it easier for people to be creative? That's going to be the way that drives the technology discussion.
Great. If we don't have any other questions coming in, Hallie, did you see any, or are we in good shape?
Yeah, I don't see any on my screen, so I think we're probably in pretty good shape.
Okay. Well, with that, just to be mindful of everyone's time, want to say a big thanks to Hallie and Matt for taking the time today to present and for PSAV's longstanding support of AHLA. We and our members greatly appreciate your partnership. And thanks also to everyone who joined us for today's presentation. We hope that you found the information valuable. Like I had mentioned, a recording of the webinar will be available in our archive in the coming days. We look forward to your participation in our next member webinar and hope you have a great afternoon.